this is kind of like Central American speed dating, right? We have to talk really fast, and I hope you'll like me at the end. Okay. Hi, my name is Leda Ramos. I'm an artist and a professor here at Cal State LA in Chicana O, Latina O Studies. I was born in '61, and the reason I'm very transparent with my age is because when I talk to my students, I let them know that in LA, in 1961, you did not hear Spanish outside your house. And there was no fast food, and there were no pupusas, and there was only the assumption that my brown skin was that I was from Mexico, right? And so that was a very different world of invisibility. No representation. Let's just say no representation except for my neighborhood, which was a very intimate street. My neighbors were Nicaragüense, who were a mix of very European and very Afro-descended. We had Costa Ricans on the other side who looked also very light-skinned. We were a mix of all colors, right? We had a Brazilian family in the corner, a Mexican family across the street, and another Salvadoran, our cousins, who lived on the other corner. So I grew up in a very unique street that was, I still cherish that uniqueness, because in LA at that time, your neighborhood was everything, and I think it still is, but your neighborhood was everything. So I just want to, this is my father, and that's me, the closest to a Mohawk that I ever got to, and he, from San Miguel, and my mother was from, he's Ereguaquin, my mother from San Miguel. He came a year before my mother in 1955. My mother came in 1956. This is Echo Park. That's my little sister behind. Within a few years, my father was able to buy a house in Echo Park with a 30-year mortgage and pay every month dutifully. It was a fixer-upper, right? So this was not some big house. This was, just a box that he kept fixing. And we all slept 7 kids in 3 rooms, right? So this is very working class. This is my mother and her brother and my brother and his wife, my uncle, who is buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Boyle Heights. And that's MacArthur Park. And that's MacArthur Park, and if you see the image a little more clearly, you can actually see the West Lake in the back. So Echo Park, MacArthur Park, Boyle Heights, that was our area. And downtown, La Placita, that was where we went to church. My elementary school was in Chinatown. So I grew up in a very multicultural, diverse environment, which I appreciate. Years later, I have an M.F.A. from Rutgers University, and when I was there, a lot of my work was centered on, and my dissertation was childhood stories, growing up, what it meant to be a Salvadoran American artist. I was really appreciative to be back east, because I could leave maybe a lot of the space of all art and Latinos doing art here in LA, and leave and go to another place that gave me a lot of perspective. People had made no assumptions about who I was, because they couldn't tell, and they didn't assume I was Mexican, because there was not even a Mexican restaurant in New Brunswick, New Jersey, right? So it was nice to be away to kind of really reflect and figure out who I was. So a lot of that work was 2 years in graduate school of a lot of writing. My dissertation, my exhibition was called Kindergarten Trampas de la Fe, which was about all the traps of faith, right? The way we grow up, the construction of our identity, right? All of those things. And so, long story short, when I came to LA after being back east for 7 years, I get a job at the Museum of Contemporary Art, where my work is to focus on bilingual art education for people in Los Angeles. And I immediately called Carecen, and within 2 years, the director of Carecen, Angela Zambrano, said, Leda, I want to hire you to develop an education program for Carecen, because we've already gone through the wave of immigration, but we are now a community that is no longer refugees. We're now the resource center, and we want to have our young kids need to know who they are. And I really feel that art is going to be that way. And I was like, I agree. So my work was to develop art projects, poetry books, film, and we had a lot of visiting artists who work with young people and families to tell their stories. It's all about getting that story out. What we're doing, we were creating archives. We were creating material. I also found that Carecen had material that wasn't really being regarded well. It was kind of tossed to the side, photographs of Carecen's history, and I said, we need to start an archive here. Why? Because I'm an artist. I use images. Images are used for documentary films, which I love. I teach film. I'm constantly looking at archival images. That's how we construct the past, right? Through words and images. And so, long story short, I was at Carecen, and there are few projects at Carecen. There are many projects at Carecen that were fundamental, but the projects that were really strong for me was the development of Isote Voz in 2000, which was a year-long project with Roberto Lovato had invited me to collaborate with Pacific News Service in San Francisco. And I was going to develop writing with young writers, many who did not think they were writers at the time. So Roquel Gutierrez, Leticia Hernandez was working in San Francisco, so it was a two-city project. And they were introduced to Rosana Perez, Maria Guardado, and to people who had lived an experience outside of the LA experience. These were Salvis, these were Salvadoran Americans who maybe came as baby or were born here, like me. And we wanted to know our history, but a lot of it was still oral history. So collecting images and collecting stories was very important and felt very urgent, right? And so a lot of the stories that, oh, the library's closing. So a lot of their work was also self-discovery and trying to figure out their identities, thinking about images and their own archive, their own images from their own families. I'll go to the next slide because I'm going to kind of... We started an archive there, but I realized, and this is something that's really interesting right now to me with archives of Central America here in the United States, is we have a lot of solidarity and sanctuary poster collections because we had the most amazing solidarity and sanctuary movement, right? And it was co-conspirators, allies, solidarity. So we have a lot of that. But the archiving of our own history by a Central American, to me, felt very urgent and very important and very timely. And when I was at Carecen, I realized Carecen wasn't ready at the time. And I'll tell you why. Because we were still getting funding from the Department of Justice, and the FMLN was still listed as a terrorist organization on the CIA website. So they were not really interested in an archive that everybody would get into and realize, oh boy, this is a little too close to home. We still have all these revolutionaries walking around who are just getting past death squad fears, right? So it was when I came here in 2016 that Enrique and Esther and I were talking, the art students are craving material to write papers and to understand their history. And so we started as a collective, but it quickly was, everybody was really busy doing a lot of different things. So I just plugged along and said, I'm going to keep doing this. And so my methodology, I call this archivista, archivista because I'm an archivist, so archivista. Why do we do this? Where did Memoria Histórica come from? Well, when we published Isote Voz in 2000, we went to El Salvador as the first transnational exchange of poets and writers in El Salvador. And who helped me to get that tour going was Mauricio Chavez and Daniel Flores Asensio, two amazing artists, writer, intellectuals who said, I will help you to kind of give you a guide. And in El Salvador in 2000, there was still so much talk about the war and recuperating the grieving and the healing through the Memoria Histórica, right? So Equipo Maíz, and then Gonsalvi with his project, the Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen, they were using the Memoria Histórica word. And I said, I'm bringing that, I'm going to use that. I came back and said, de la Memoria Histórica. And so I still use that word, and it is connected to all of these things, right? We all connect the dots. So what is the methodology? Why we do this? The roots of Memoria Histórica, going back from here to El Salvador and back, the healing, cultural affirmation, resistance and healing, right? To have memory and to have archival images of memory gives us power. Without it, we have, right? We know the written and visual word allows us to remember and to have power, right? So my methodology is, as a Salvi artist, activista, feminista, community scholar, that's my positionality. I'm going to have to read it this way. It's easier. It's an archive project founded and curated and developed by a Salvi American artist community scholar in collaboration with Central American donors. So the individual donors are as collaborators, right? To focus on archiving the historical memory and the intersectional spaces of Central American art, performance, cultural affirmation, poetry, music, curators, filmmakers, and historians in LA. I'm an artist. I've read a lot about immigration. I love it. I need to understand it. But I am an artist, so I want to see what cultural producers, how artists are telling the story as well. So that's my space. So the birth of Kama, theory to practice. So I have to thank Alejandro Lemus, who graduated from LAS, and Carla Duarte, who had graduated in anthropology from UCLA, because they collaborated with me, and we said, we're going to work on an exhibit. And we did this in 2 months. It was insane. But a lot of the archiving I had already had in my body and system for decades. So I knew where to go and where to get things. And it was amazing. Because I was here at a time where I kind of felt like, academia is a tough place because you do work and then sometimes other people take credit for it. And you're kind of like, what? I worked on this for 2 years. Where's my name? Right? And so I was feeling a little sad at that time. And then when I found out that I could do this exhibit, it was a healing moment. So this birth of Kama comes out of deep grief and pain and resilience. And so I was just like, we're gonna work this. And we were all so driven. We were here till midnight every day for months, working insanely on this exhibit. And thank you, Bernard, and thank you, Azalea, and the people who were in special collections, because they saw us work like just busy bees to make this exhibit, which was on family networks in Central America. So that was there for 2 months. We had panels. We had Lacy and Flori and Alejandro and Enrique, and it was a panel that we had. And I remember Enrique said, oh, I almost cried seeing all these new scholars up there and stuff, because we were now moving into another generation and another generation. So I am just beyond excited to see all of these things connected. So the gathering of the Memoria Histórica is a personal relational donor collection based on decades of friendship. I don't go and just say, hey, I want your collection. That is how sometimes collections are actually acquired, right? Very impersonal. But this is decades of friendship, trust, and working in the Central American art, culture, and social justice-based communities. It's a collaborative that's slow. I've been working on this for 6 years. Donor acquisition. I'm not going to push anyone to give me their life in 20 and 40 boxes and say, no, I need it now because, my project's due at this time. Or my paper is due, right? Or my book schedule is due. That's not how I work, right? I work as slow as it needs to happen. People are working. People are grieving. We had COVID. That was a very intense time. So it's a slow process centering dignity, respect for the donor, positionality, and collaborative work with the University Library Collection and Archives. And Azalea Camacho, I just want to thank you for the trust you had, because when you come into an academic space and you don't have a PhD, sometimes people look down on you, right? I mean, I interviewed 6 times at the Getty Research Institute when I got a CAA College Art Association fellowship, because they couldn't believe that an artist would want to work around, art production. They couldn't believe it. That was a long time ago. Now it's like normal. Oh yeah, an artist collaborating with someone who has an academic. So let me go to the next. So Kama now is in its 6th year. The donors, Rosa Maria Segura, classic book, student here at Cal State LA. in geography, worked with Latin American studies as well, collecting all of these images, of which there's some images of some people in this room. And this was her project. This is what she worked on. This book came out in 2010. So Isote Voz came out in 2000. I just want to show you that, you know, there's some moments of like, wow, continuity and gaps too. Rosa Maria Segura, so her images are here. So when we were working on these exhibits, she heard about the exhibit, she came running over and said, can I give you all my digital images? Yes, you can. My papers are in there because I worked at Carecen. I worked on some very significant projects. The Carecen mural I worked on for 2 years, doing community engagement with high school students from Belmont High School. So Judy Baca came in after 2 years to look at all the work that we had done, and it was teaching Central American Studies, basically, in a community setting. And we had interviews with Rosana. Rosana's in lots of projects with students. And then that got developed and taken to UCLA, and they worked on it more. So when Judy Baca says, I did this mural, it's actually not true. It's her name's on it, and I'm glad, you know, because Spark paid for it. But it was a collaboration that was very detailed, and there's still so much that has not been written about the mural. I see the mural posted everywhere without any credit or any kind of line, which I find kind of a little disturbing. Rosana, who's here, has a legacy of incredible work both in El Salvador and here in LA for decades, right, as an activist, indigenous activist, as an artist. Right? Again, one of the things that's very interesting is that a lot of people have multiple sides. We're artists and we're also doing social justice work. Alma Ruiz is a Guatemalan curator who was for 30 years the curator of Latin American art at MOCA. Came from Guatemala when she was a teenager. And now the Central American Cultural Center Museum of Art and History of Central America collection, which has the longest name, but you all will talk about that, which is great. And then on the docket is Roland Palencia, Roberto Lovato, Elia Arce, Costa Rican performance artist, Dora's artwork, and then hopefully Carolina Rivera Escamilla. But again, my project is 10 years, right? It is not everybody, it's not all of Central America. It's relational, it's built on who people I know. So there's room for more. So, but this archive is not the end all. We also did a lot of programming. So this was a bookmark that I made. This was the poster. I also work with a graphic designer, my partner, so we make a lot of the graphics that you see here. So this was the image of Alejandro's parents, right, when they went to go see When the Mountains Tremble, and they were protesting near Rios Montt. Right, and then so this poster, Radio Pulgarcito came to perform both at the opening and at the closing. I first presented Kama at the Liberated Futures as a panelist. We invited Roberto Lovato about his book, that was also part of Kama, to talk about his new book, right, Unforgetting. We screened Eternos Indocumentados, that was also with Flori. And we brought that film here so that we could talk about the film. And that was, oh, sorry. That's Radio Pulgarcito, which I want to say, just quick, 2 people, Rocio Velez, who was a high school student working on the Carecen mural, just emailed me yesterday asking for a letter of recommendation to go to USC, to graduate school. Another person, Radio Pulgarcito, just entered UCLA's graduate program for archiving, and their project is about archiving. So I'm just excited. My father was a sobador. My father, when he came to LA, became a waiter. He was a farmer in El Salvador. But I saw people come to the house, and then he would be giving them sobando their legs, you know. And I said, "Pops, where'd you learn that?" He goes, "In the military. They taught us how to do this." But so I've been thinking about that. He was a sobador. People came to him and he just helped them and they went away happy, never charged them. And so I feel I want to be a sobadora of Central American history and culture. People come to my house, they look at my books, we talk, we have coffee, and then they'll leave having nourished with something. So that's what I'm thinking. This is when Mauricio came, right? And this is the Sotevos. This is Daniel when he was here, when he did a project for Diálogo Binacional para Decolonización. Foro 2000 was the trip that we took. This is a book upcoming that Enrique is co-editor of on Central America, and I have worked there. This logo, again, I designed with my partner, Eileen Herrera. And the last one, I think that's it. Oh, and this is us working on the Carecen mural. So I have in my archive a lot of the films from Foro 2000. We have films from working on this mural. We have a whole thing that has never been written about, because I never had time. I just moved on, I had to keep moving, and had kids and taking care of my parents. This is Tatiana Reynosa, Salvadoran art historian, and we were there. This is Rocio Velez, who was in high school working on the mural. She still works at Carecen. She actually graduated with her BA and then went back to Carecen. And so we were explaining the mural, and she said, now when I go teach, I can explain the mural so much better because I had no idea what was the behind the scenes of this mural. So we have yet to do a lot of writing. Roland Valencia is another person who just, I met him when he was at Clínica Romero. He is executive producer of Unidad, Gay and Lesbian Unidos in Los Angeles. So we screened that for the AHAS conference, which was just in February. And then I organized a panel, and we look very tired, all of us. Organized a panel of Central American queer artists at Self-Help Graphics. And so Dalila and I'm spacing on names right now because this is really fast. So that's it. That's my presentation.